The marvelous mystery, and I think it's a mystery at the heart of the center, is that as we together, arms linked, look into these threats, refuse the comforts of ignorance and blindness, refuse the comforts of pretending indifference, and just look together, something happens. Mystery becomes adventure.
Joanna Macy has inspired us, and I think she's had this almost immeasurable impact on so many different movements.
When I think about Joanna's life's work, there are these beautiful threads that she weaves, including the wisdom of Buddhism, systems theory, nuclear guardianship, poetry. I mean, there's a lot.
Joanna Macy is a scholar, an author, has written many books, led workshops and facilitation all across the world.
Joanna Macy's work is practiced in hundreds of different countries, with facilitators practicing these methods in many different languages.
Joanna's work in and of itself is connective and shows you all of these connections.
There was like a braiding quality of all topics I was very interested in, but had not seen put together in these sorts of ways.
Her work recognizes an interconnectedness between all beings, a mystical nature to life.
As a philosopher, her dissertation, her work on mutual causality, kind of central notion of a thoroughgoing, interdependent, mutually reciprocal network across all that we can imagine existing, leads to this radical notion of self as expansive and always in relation to everything else.
The guiding principles of Joanna Macy's work help us reconnect to ourselves and to nature, to process the emotions and feelings that we're going through.
She gave such a template for how to work in really challenging areas and how to allow that work to break open your heart and to sustain oneself in that work.
I really appreciate that Joanna Macy's work can simultaneously hold a container for honoring grief, but also be extremely loving and uplifting.
What we do here at Naropa with Joanna Macy's work is that we're actually using it in a scholarly manner. We're bringing it into the classroom, and we're also doing work outside the community to build further networks and partnerships with activists and to bring these teachings to the world.
At Naropa, the spirit has been adventurous, bringing together ancient teachings and wide awake calls for creativity in the arts and in language and in movement, and widening the heart-mind for seeing the opportunities that the world at this moment presents.
The work that Reconnects core principles are designed to help us process the times that we're living in.
There is a weaving of a new way of seeing the world that is much more rooted in a profound connectedness to the world and a lack of separation. We can't save the world if we see ourselves as separate from it.
Joanna Macy's work and the work that reconnects leads through a spiral that helps us be honest about our experience for the sake of seeing in new ways.
The 4 parts of the spiral of the work that reconnects, starting with gratitude, honoring our pain for the world, seeing with new ancient eyes, and going forth into the world.
Going through the entire spiral and hitting all of the pieces on the spiral is what helps us to really heal more holistically and liberate that energy in a more complete way.
First, we acknowledge gratitude and our thankfulness for what's here.
Even just taking a moment to be grateful is really turning the tide on an industrial growth society mindset.
So from a place of gratitude, we can actually honor our pain more fully.
I really appreciate the way that Joanna Macy's work holds a container for grief and for the sacredness of grief and for the honoring and processing of grief.
I think there's something deeply powerful about like being in a room that holds a strong container to cry and scream and let it out.
There's many processes that there's holding, this grief and gratitude at the same time. And those processes have very much to do with then being able to now see clearly, to hear clearly.
Seeing with new or ancient eyes, we are so resistant to change and are so much stuck in this business as usual, just doing the cycle, doing what my parents did, doing what this is, that I think every person needs to be able to open their eyes to new perspectives.
And then you go forth, and it always gives you something that you can do.
It allows people to see, like, we can do this, we can work together.
Something I really like that Joanna Macy has long said is that this isn't just a wish. We're not, sitting in front of a birthday cake, closing our eyes and making a wish over a candle and expecting that when we open our eyes, the world will be changed. It's the act of hopefulness. It's the act of moving towards the world that we want to create.
This system of the spiral of the work that reconnects can be repeated. So though that's a technology that we can do in a 3-hour workshop or a 2-day weekend workshop, it doesn't just stop. It keeps like a spiral. It just keeps on spinning. So we can always come back to our gratitude, we can always come back to our pain, and we can always imagine new ways of seeing the world so that we can continue to go forth.
The 3 stories of our time from the work that reconnects, business as usual, the great unraveling, and the great turning, all happening simultaneously.
She talks about business as usual, which is this worldview of hyper-extraction, hyper-consumption.
We're also hearing the messages of the great unraveling because the systems are unraveling. They're losing their coherence. Ecosystems are collapsing.
The great turning is this moment in which we get to decide as a human species what the future of this planet will look like and how we want to be with one another.
We have the capacity to rewrite the narrative of business as usual and actually tell a story collectively that we are healing the world and we are taking action on some of these issues that are really important and pivotal. So it's rewriting the social narrative that's shared between us.
Recognizing that all 3 of these are playing out in our world simultaneously, it really allows a person to kind of have choice in which one they want to participate in.
The work that reconnects really calls to me, and I think there was a time in my life where I was so caught in my own despair or was caught in my own grief or my own emotions that I thought, oh, we're doomed. And we might be, but we have that as one option, or we have the option to go forward and to look at what I can do in this lifetime to make a difference. Joanna Macy was a product of the Cold War. She grew up in that time where the atom bomb was dropped. She saw the devastation that occurred in Chernobyl.
Joanna recognized the deep urgency and long-term need for education and action around nuclear and radioactive materials.
It's in everything. It's in our air. It's in our food. It's in our water. And the world isn't awake to that.
There's no scientific agreed upon solution. Every container that we will put nuclear waste in will, number 1, become radioactive itself and will eventually disintegrate. How do we contain and safely protect this material that can harm all life forms? That is a scientific problem. It's a spiritual problem. It's a psychological problem of how do we live with it. And so nuclear guardianship is a way to begin to face the reality of that.
A lot of people here today don't know that at one point the Front Range of Colorado was actually very much like at the heart of the nuclear weapons industry during the Cold War.
Just down the road is Rocky Flats, about 8 miles from where Naropa sits. The plutonium triggers that were built at Rocky Flats caused a lot of waste, and that waste was then spread throughout the land at Rocky Flats. It became an EPA Superfund site in the 1970s.
I never knew about this going to school at CU, but it's been kept very secret.
There was a day that's now known as the Encirclement, where 70,000 people came to Colorado and held hands and encircled the 17-mile perimeter of the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant. On that day, the organizers of that event, due to the success of the event, decided to start the Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center to carry on that legacy of activism and nuclear guardianship.
Rocky Flats was designated a wildlife protected sanctuary. And I want that to sink in, because the idea of putting a wildlife sanctuary and putting recreational trails through a contaminated radioactive site is misleading to the public.
There was the campaign to ban field trips, campaign to stop the Jefferson Parkway, the campaign to stop the Rocky Mountain Greenway, which is a mountain bike trail being proposed to go through Rocky Flats, and that was due to community engagement and education around what is happening.
Well past our lives, people will still be getting impacted by the waste that's left over from nuclear military sites or from nuclear waste.
Deep time is a concept that shows up in the spiral, but it's very applicable to nuclear guardianship, because when we look at materials like plutonium, nuclear waste, radionuclides, that in the case of plutonium, its half-life is 240,000 years. Nuclear materials, they really demand that we think differently about time, and they are our teacher in that way.
The biggest thing that Joanna, I think, allowed me to see in terms of like the complexity of this issue is that we have essentially doomed hundreds of future generations to have a militaristic society, if only to protect the nuclear waste that somebody could, try to steal and then turn into nuclear weapons, right? Without having that waste, maybe someday in the future, we would have like a totally peaceful society where there would be no need for like any kind of military. But because of nuclear power and therefore nuclear waste, we'll always have to have a society that is like set up to be able to protect that. And that's just not something that you hear. She just is like so attuned to the deep time aspect of like what this choice that we made from a very narrow way of thinking like actually implicates in terms of like generations and generations of people.
Wrestling with and facing the reality that we as human beings have created this material that we have to warn future generations about and protect them from. Instead of putting it out of sight and out of mind, we take on the responsibility that I'm a part of a species that did this, and I'm going to take responsibility for future generations, for their survival. I want to give them a chance, So I'm going to do the hard work of taking ownership and responsibility for that.
A lot of the work of Joanna Macy borrows from global perspectives, indigenous wisdom.
Her love for this wild and beautiful planet is at the center of her work, while also being deeply committed to Buddhist teachings.
There are many epistemologies around the world that are old and deep and have a tremendous amount of wisdom. There's these intersections where these different frameworks and paradigms come together in really beautiful ways.
Liberation Dharma touches in on Buddhist teachings of transformation, first by looking at ourselves.
In order for there to be societal transformation, you have to start with personal transformation.
It's about really interrogating the ways that we have been colonized from the inside out to be consumers, to buy new clothes every season.
When we talk about the liberation component, we're talking about ways in which we transform ourselves and we break apart the social conditioning or the social constructs that hold us down.
Humans being separate and superior from the rest of the natural world. That's one of the big delusions that I think we're all fighting against right now, and that many people in modern Western culture are starting to wake up to, like, wait, that can't be true. That's not true.
A lot of what we are doing with Joanna's work is thinking about ourselves and seeing ourselves as a part of nature, reconnecting with that.
Talking about the fundamental nature of reality as being interdependent. And so, like, as reality comes into being, that everything is inextricably tied.
I think one of the great detriments to our thinking in a modern Western sense is this over-attachment to reducing things so much that we now think that they are independent of everything else, that there is no forces of connection between everything else. We've reduced. We've inherited this belief that we can understand these complex systems by solely understanding their parts. The only way to actually understand a complex system is to view it as a whole.
Buddhist practice and a Buddhist philosophy invites us to examine the way in which habitual patterns influence our way of perceiving the world and kind of acting and reacting in relation to the world.
The next layer to that is, how do we engage interpersonally? So how do we have compassion for others who are also existing in industrial growth society, where there's so much push to work 40, 50, 60 hours, and there's accolades for being overly productive.
One of the things that I think Liberation Dharma asks is for us to examine our tendency towards reactivity. And there's something about a pause between our experience and our reaction to experience, building in a pause that opens up a space for responsibility. Respond well to the moment in a more spacious, clear-seeing way. And that tends to give us inspiration to not only be courageous and resilient, but see pathways forward that could regenerate and bring back into harmony a system that is deeply out of balance.
We're not really free until everyone is free. And we really need to understand that, because until we get to that point, it's just going to be repeating the cycles and the systems of oppression that have held us down and have not allowed the planet to heal.
If liberation is going to happen, it's not only about my liberation, it's about all of us collectively liberating, all working together as a woven network that we're actively participating in.
And when we can get to a place of radical liberation, and now we're talking about this in the sense of collective liberation, it's that idea of one mind, that we're all in the same track, that we're all included in this story.
I'm hopeful that enough of us are willing and courageous enough to expand our thinking, to expand our worldviews, to expand our paradigms. If we're able to do that, I think we could really get somewhere.
I think that Joanna Macy's work will continue to have legacy and impact future generations, because it is a very open container of how to do the work. Because it is creative in its nature, I think that it can take form in a lot of different capacities and ways.
Her ability to bring together deep ecology and systems thinking with Buddhist principles and truths, but to really understand the capacity that we have as humans to grok what's going on and be in it in a meaningful way. She was able to really sense all of that and create a body of work that's really accessible and really profound and has inspired so many people to take action and to continue to have radical hope about how we can save our planet.
I wrote Joanna a letter early on in the hives world, just wanting her to know that work that she had done was shaping work that was happening here. So the quality of ripples and how actions, words she's written, teachings that have happened and passed to me through other teachers, there's immeasurable ripples from that. It's really lovely.
I feel deeply grateful to Joanna Macy for allowing us to have a Joanna Macy Center here at Naropa.
It's beautiful to see how it's taken on a life of its own. I love seeing the ways that other scholars and activists and artists are living out the work that reconnects, and I am grateful to Naropa for creating a home for that.
To have the Joanna Macy Center at an academic institution that has strong Buddhist influence and has strong dedication to transforming yourself, transform the world, it makes total sense that Joanna Macy's legacy would be well cared for here.
I don't think there could be a better place for the Joanna Macy Center than Naropa University. We attract people who care deeply about what is plaguing our people and our planet and who really want to be a part of transformation and healing. And so when they encounter the work of Joanna Macy, it's like a perfect partnership. Usually they feel very inspired and also like someone's really seeing into the depths of their soul and what they want to do. And it's just a perfect synergy, our students and Joanna Macy's work.
What we do at the Joanna Macy Center to work toward the great turning and the evolution, this kind of waking up of the human condition, is that we have a lot of various practices, rituals, experiences that allow people to drop into their bodies. We do practices that are very adaptable, given any kind of context or situation, that allow people to process their emotions, to be seen, to have their voices be heard.
Last semester, a student group was started, inspired by reading Coming Back to Life in a deep ecology class. And thus the Joanna Macy facilitation group was born, where we would study the book and try to practice and learn to be facilitators in that way.
From that student group, we're now offering a class in facilitation.
I am so excited to tell you about the Work That Reconnects course. It's a brand new course here at Naropa that walks students through decolonial perspectives on how we engage in the world related to social determinants of health, environmentalism, and layers of eco-psychology and really eco-justice.
We really get the freedom to do it our way and do it the way that we think our communities would benefit from.
Is my favorite class here right now. It's really phenomenal.
I'm deeply grateful that we were able to do this work at Naropa. So much gratitude to Joanna Macy and the legacy that she's left at Naropa University.
I think Joanna Macy has a very powerful way of bringing resilience into people's hearts and find the patience that's needed to address these topics that span so many lifetimes, really beyond our comprehension, hundreds of thousands of years.
In many ways, Joanna Macy's work is articulating deep ecology as a practiced possibility that we can do together in communities in order to really address suffering and harms done to ecosystems.
Her love for this wild and beautiful planet is at the center of her work.
She sees the way that everything is connected and can explain it in a way that everybody else can get.
For me, it gives me hope. I don't just walk away from a Joanna Macy experience or a workshop or a ritual with the feeling of what next? I walk away feeling more deeply rooted in my human nature and my connections to others in my community. I walk away feeling inspired. I walk away even with just like a simple suggestion of how I can change myself and how that will also change the world around me.
It gives us a set and a body of practices that connect us not only to one another, but to our ancestors and to future beings. And so it really widens the perspective that we can take as participants in counteracting the destructive patterns of industrialized society.
I think Joanna's done such an amazing job sharing that truth in so many different circles, and then inspiring people who then spread it and spread it.
It really impacted me to be able to see people as a whole as like, actually we can be a force for good.
There's these intersections where these different frameworks and paradigms come together in really beautiful ways. And I think if we can kind of abide in that big picture systemic, thinking, we can utilize the modern Western innovation in really beneficial ways, because we're developing those through a lens that's much older and much bigger.
We should be finding more harmony within our own planet, and I think Joanna Macy's work really speaks to that cosmic scale of time and what we need to do as a civilization and a species to be more in harmony.
I tell my students, just strap in. Like we got some work to do, and we kind of need to get going on it right now. And at the same time, be patient with yourself, be loving with yourself, be compassionate with yourself. Do your best to extend that to other people.
Societal change does not occur in a linear fashion. Nothing's changing, and then all of a sudden everything changes very quickly. I found that it's really helpful to remind people of that. Just because it doesn't look like things are getting better, the pieces are still being put in place for the change that we ultimately want to see.
The wonder is that you're able to suffer with your world. And that is good news indeed. Because to suffer with is the literal meaning of compassion. You are a compassionate being. You are a bodhisattva. The bodhisattva is the one who knows that there is no private salvation, but we're in this together. And it's our realizing that is what, and perhaps the only thing that can save our world now. Wow. What a time to have a mind